Okay.
Is anyone opposed? No. All right.
No.
Then we're starting at 5:05. And Robin, you'll be glad to know that that means I can talk even more. No. So welcome everyone to a very special meeting because it's an AGM where we're being recorded and it's virtual. Oh, now I have a telephone in front of me. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, this is Pearl Davy.
Oh, thanks, Pearl.
There. All right.
Okay.
All right. So what we're first going to do is ask Richard Allen to explain the protocol for the virtual meeting. Richard.
Well, I think what we'll do here, I'm not hearing any feedback or any problems with the microphones at all. Maybe what I will do is when the presentations come up, Diane, and we're in the more formal parts, I'll mute everybody if that's okay, and then it'll allow better clarity for the person that's presenting, and then I can unmute if that's okay with the group.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
So first of all, I would like to welcome all of you here and all the board members, and thank all the board members for their work this year. We've had a busy year. First, I'll ask for John Kajas, the secretary. He will read some of his report and the rest will be online. John.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you could join us. What I'll be doing is essentially doing two things, referring you to our website under meetings for last year's minutes of the 2019 AGM at your own leisure. And secondly, I will just give the highlights of that meeting that we had last year. First highlight was what we're doing right now is the reports of the executive, being the treasurer's report, membership, and secretary and chair's report. A highlight from the chair's report was the Auchmar the Warriors presentation that we did with the Westdale last year. Another highlight from last year's meeting was, well, let me put it this way, a changing of the guard, more or less. We introduced Mr. John Summers and Carrie Brooks Joyner in their new roles. John would be taking over from me and Kerr Wilson, who had retired. And lastly, our keynote speaker from last year was Ian Kerr Wilson, and he sort of summed up his career in heritage in his own fashion and with a specific emphasis on Auchmar and how that grand old lady can be turned into a jewel somehow, more or less. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, John. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive his report, please? Moved by, second by Dennis.
You're muted.
All in favor? Is anyone opposed? No. Then John, your minutes will say it's received and moved and seconded, correct?
Absolutely.
The second report is from Pat Saunders membership. Patricia.
Okay. All right. The Friends of Auchmar membership register lists 153 individuals with their names, addresses, telephone number, email address, category, and membership status. The membership categories are comprised of 75 individual members, 39 family members, 12 sustaining members comprised of 2 families and 10 individuals, 3 associate members, and 1 organizational member. These are renewed annually in October at the annual general meeting, which we're having tonight, but we have waived the membership fee for 2020. The current due is AGM October 20th. There were 2 and 3 years for 18 and 19 and 20 years in arrears, when the membership information will be removed from the register and they will be dropped from being identified as members. The register last recorded in January the 6th of 2020, following the 2019 annual general meeting. It indicated that 62 memberships are due for renewal in October of 2020, which means they won't have to be renewed this year. 12 memberships become 2 years in arrears. They'll now only become 1 year in arrears, and 17 memberships will become 3 years in arrears, but there will now only be 2 years in arrears. I hope you could all follow that. I have to admit, I had trouble putting it together, but I took my time and counted and recounted. Now, what we have to appreciate, if we drop those 3-year non-payment members, that our membership list will decline from the one I mentioned up above, a 153. It's going to decline to 136 until new members are recruited. I move the acceptance of this report.
Thank you. Would someone move and second that request?
I'll second.
Nina,
Let's see,
thank
Nina.
you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Nina.
move it. Yeah.
So Pat moved, Nina seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Right. Carried. Thank you. We now move to John Buchanan, Treasurer. John.
Helps if I hit the speak button. Okay. So we had our financial statements will end up being online. We will actually email them out to people after the meeting as well. To sum it up, for our April 30th, 2020 fiscal year, we had a profit of $1,163. Part of that is mostly because we weren't able to have any more meetings during this current year. And as of that point, we had $11,385 in our bank accounts. That pretty much sums up where we stand.
Thank you, John. Would someone move
And
and
if someone has questions, I'll answer them.
good idea, John. Thank you. If there are no questions, may I ask someone to move and someone to second the receipt of that report? Moved by
Terry.
Terry, seconded by
Robin.
Robin. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. So moved. Thank you. Now it's time for my report. I'm pleased to present the Friends of Auchmar Chair's Annual Report for November 2019 to October 2020. I will highlight events and accomplishments and provide some insight into the year ahead. My full report will be available on our website. As you know, last year, the Friends of Auchmar Annual General Meeting was held on December the 4th, 2019 at the Hamilton Club. As you've heard, the meeting began with board reports, followed by Secretary John Kajask reading the approved changes in the Friends of Auchmar Constitution and bylaws. Following approval of the board reports and the slate of officers, board member Richard Allen introduced and welcomed Ian Kerr-Wilson, the keynote. Ian, who had just retired as manager, Heritage Resource Management, had worked closely with the Friends of Auchmar for many years. So with his background knowledge and expertise, we were delighted Ian agreed to present the story, My Life in Heritage. Following Ian's address, Councillor John Paul Danko was welcomed to the podium to thank Ian for his outstanding and informative presentation and to provide an update of ward activities. Councillor Danko then invited Carrie Brooks Joyner, the City of Hamilton's new Director for Tourism, Culture and Planning, to say a few words. The 2019 AGM ended with a cake cutting by Ian in honor of his many years of service, and I think there are photographs on the website. One of the Friends of Auchmar's most successful members meeting, entitled The War Years at Auchmar, took place on November the 6th, 2019 at the Westdale Theatre. This premiere film screening was in remembrance of Canada's World War II TF air fighters. It was in 1943 that Dr. Philip Volker set up a convalescent hospital at the Auchmar estate for recovering World War II RCF airmen. Dr. Volker was responsible for the care of the airmen. Perhaps to validate the patient's progress, it was Dr. Volker who decided to film their daily activities. It was also thanks to Fred Fouche, restorer of the Westdale Theatre and chair of the Westdale Theatre Board, who agreed to sponsor our event. Bob Cowan, thanks to Robin, became our host at that event. Back acted as master of ceremonies. Mark McNeil, Hamilton Spectator reporter, and Les Smith provided songs and music to a packed Westdale audience, and we're really thrilled to see that it was packed. 95-year-old Doug Emmilton spoke about growing up in the Auchmar Gatehouse and how the film came to be made. Sponsors included Judy Marsail's Real Estate, Global, the Concession Street BIA, Anne Birmingham, Martha Mitchell, the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, and Ward 8 City Hamilton. Bob and Karen Wilkins, owners of La Caniche Bakery, donated dozens of shortbread cookies decorated with the Friends of Auchmar logo, and I hope that will also be a photo on our web. David Rohrer, President and CEO of the Heritage War Museum, and Al Michaloff, Marketing Director, participated in this event and donated tickets to visit the museum. Hamilton author John Soika donated books as door prizes. One of the reasons for the success of our event at the Westdale Theatre was thanks to a meeting in July 2019 with David Simpson, president of the Head of the Lake and the Westdale BIA, who had previously hosted an event at the Westdale. And it's thanks to Robin who alerted us to that. David recommended a run through at the theater well in advance of our event to ensure that the film that had been transferred from rolls of film to DVD format years ago was of good quality and that speakers test their slides. And we were concerned with the film because several people told us it wasn't viewable, but it was. David explained that he had not tested his film and the quality was not as good as he had hoped, and he felt our meeting went much better. His advice was greatly appreciated. In the spring of 2019, the Department of Culture, City of Hamilton, invited the Friends of Auchmar to be the host at Doors Open, Saturday, May the 4th. Bill King, author of Buchanan of Auchmar, set up a table in the Manor House to speak with guests and sell his book. Artist Norris Podetz set up his easel and chatted with guests while he painted. Visitors were interested to purchase his drawings of the Auchmar estate. Bill King and Diane Dent provided Jane walks tours of the grounds of Auchmar. Richard Allen interviewed visitors and provided visio presentations inside and outside of past Auchmar meetings, and most of them were voices from Auchmar. We noticed that these activities seemed to attract even more interest than in former years. An important initiative took place at City Hall with Councillor John Paul Danko and Ian Kerr-Wilson before Ian retired. And they met with Friends of Auchmar board members Richard Allen and Diane Dent to discuss mutual goals for the Auchmar estate via a letter of collaboration or a memorandum of understanding. We did learn from Ian that the Friends of Battlefield House and the Friends of Fieldcoat have similar agreements. Ian also informed us that the St. James Preservation Society in Toronto and the Medill Church Preservation Society in Huntsville also have such agreements. Our letter of collaboration is a work in progress. In February 2019, a very important staff report to the General Issues Committee concerning the Auchmar estate was released. Glenn Norton, Director of Economic Development, reported that the 13th Battalion Auchmar Heritage Trust unfortunately had failed to advance its business case for funding. Glenn wrote, and I quote, "It's time to move on. We cannot just let things sit any longer. Instead, the city intends to develop its own work plan," end of quote. But the newspaper continued to say, Glenn Norton says that vision includes looking at other potential tenants and city generated alternatives. Norton said staffers were initially very optimistic about the trust's vision, and so were we. He agreed the trust did seem like a perfect fit because the estate was the home of Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Buchanan, the 19th century founding commander of the 13th Battalion, now the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry. Even in March, a previous year of 2018, with lack of concrete progress and momentum, councillors opted to give the trust some more time. It was confirmed that all potential plans must be compatible with legal preservation agreements with the Ontario Heritage Trust. and that the city retain ownership of the estate, a position ratified by the last term of council. The board of the Friends of Auchmar suggested to Glenn Norton that the Departments of Culture, Economic Development, along with the Council of the Ward, tour examples of successful adaptive reuse of city-owned heritage buildings, such as the Bell Gardner Estate in Mississauga, and thanks to Terry and others and John Kajask, tour the Annandale House in Tilsonburg. We do unfortunately understand that that tour has not yet taken place. For your interest, I'd like to tell you about January 2020. I was approached by McMaster and Redeemer University to provide a tour of the Auchmar Estate for fourth year history students who are participating in a required public history practicum course. I was delighted to provide a tour of Auchmar Estate grounds, and thanks to Carolyn Samko, one of our keynotes tonight, she organized a tour of the interior of the Auchmar Manor House. The students were thrilled with the opportunity to learn so much from Carolyn about the history and architecture of the Auchmar Estate. To assist their public history practicum project, John Paul Danko, Councillor of the Ward, provided the students with the Auchmar Estate Landscape Improvement and Vegetation Assessment Report, written by Wendy Shearer, award-winning landscape architect and cultural heritage specialist. The Friends of Auchmar Board appreciates the importance of saying thank you. Thank you notes were sent to sponsors of all our events and to the Hamilton Public Library for the donation in memory of Larry Mon, a member of the Friends of Auchmar, and to Francine Tobacco, Assistant Production Manager, Cream Productions in television. She donated funds to Save the Dovecote campaign as thanks for using photographs in a television series where Auchmar was featured. Bill King verified the images and the copyright. Also, a special note was sent to Anna Bradford, a thank you note to her when she retired as Director of Tourism and Culture. Anna has had a long, long relationship with the Friends of Auchmar. It was very sad for us to say goodbye. She will be greatly missed, and hope that we have as good a relationship with Carrie and with John. In closing, I know many of you will ask, do you have news to share for the future use of the Auchmar Estate? We do not know what restoration plans or long-term lease arrangements are being discussed, but as soon as we receive notification from Hamilton City Council on the status of the city's business plan for Auchmar, we will email you and post that information on our website. Thank you again for your interest and support. This report is respectfully submitted. Diane Gowerdant, Chair, Friends of Auchmar. May I have a mover and a seconder for my report, please?
Move.
Moved by Nina. Seconded by
Well, I'll second it.
John. Thank you. Thank you. So some of you didn't know all about all that information. Now, the next is John Kajask is going to explain why there's no election this year because of the coronavirus, and he's going to welcome officers for another term. John.
Well, once again, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to deal with this in the following manner. 2020 would have seen the current board stand down and a new slate of directors elected. Given the nature of COVID-19 and the protocols in place, the election of the board of directors for 2020 has been postponed. It will occur. It will occur. The best way I can illustrate that is once we are able to gather in a larger group, say let's use April and September of 2021 as examples. If we have election in April, then the board stands for approximately 18 months. If we have an election in September, then the board stands for a 1-year term. So you continue that 2-year cycle. At present, your current board will continue to sit and conduct the business of the Friends of Auchmar and its membership. And that's the reasoning for no election. I thank you.
Thank you, John. So just to remind you, John Kajask, who just spoke, is secretary. Pat Saunders is membership. John Buchanan is treasurer. I'm the current chair. And we have to look and see who the members at large are. Richard Allen is there, right? Richard is the one who organized the meeting for tonight. Bob Gill, who does the web, is out of town. He's in North Bay. Terry Geisler is here. And
Robin.
Robin's vice chair. Robin, he's the most important person. He picks up all the important detail. Robin, do you want to say a few words before we move on?
Thank you. This gives me the great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. And we have John Summers, he's the manager of Heritage Resource Management at the City of Hamilton, and Caroline Samko, who was my ex-neighbor, senior project manager of the Heritage Facilities and Capital Planning City of Hamilton. Thank you.
And Carol, are you good at?
Oh, is it all three at once? Okay. And Carol Primo, she is the heritage consultant and artist and member of the Beasley neighborhood. Thank you.
And I'd like to John Summers, never say no, and we're very, very grateful. So John and Carol, or Carolyn, what do we need to do to see your presentations?
I need to be enabled to be able to share.
And Richard, I guess is that for you or for you, Carolyn?
It's probably for me.
Yeah, it says
and
the
I go
host
down-
needs to be able to enable me.
Okay, one participant, multiple participants can share simultaneously, maybe?
That's the one.
Nick?
That'll do it.
Is that the one? That'll do it?
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
There we go.
Hey.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
It's clear.
May I just ask everyone to shut off their microphones on their own, please? And then that'll just give Carolyn nice audio, please.
How do I do that?
Just down at the bottom there in the left hand, it says
Bottom
mute.
left. Yeah, mute yourself.
On the screen?
Don't worry about it, Pat.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's okay.
Whoops, sorry. There we go. Trying to get my camera to work here. Okay, John, do you want to start?
Yeah, only insofar as I'll say that Carol and I have some images that we'll show you and a few points. And then I think at the end of this, there is a slide that says questions, but I might leap in and say a few more things and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'll turn the first part over to Carolyn.
Okay, we wanted to start with a general update, just to give you an update of some of the things that are going on site. In this last year, we've re-roofed the coach house roof to keep some of the rain and water leaking out of it. There was an extensive building code analysis of the main house, the chapel buildings and the dormitory buildings, and that was to inform site development work that staff are doing in Heritage Resource Management. Along with that was a structural analysis. There was some fear that the dormitory structures were undergoing some stress. And so a structural analysis was done of those buildings just to help us for planning. We undertook in the last couple of years some selective pruning of the historic apple trees in the orchard in order to stop some of the major limbs from being damaged by winter and by storm. And our intern, who's currently at the Balfour Estate, has been in talks with the University of Guelph as part of their extensive program of research they're doing into heritage varieties of apples in Ontario. And they've approached her and asked her whether she would facilitate some DNA research both at Belfour and at Auchmar. And we're just in the discussion stage with the University of Guelph. If that happens, then our heritage trees will be entered into the Ontario Heritage Fruit Database, which will assist other people in Ontario to be able to research their heritage trees, but it will also develop a DNA like a almost like a seed saving database, so that they have information and samples of heritage trees from the early part of the 19th century. And so I'm going to turn it over to John in order to do a update of the Gatehouse. You probably recognize this picture. This is a historic photograph that dates probably to the 1960s. And that's looking from the street side of the Gatehouse.
Thanks. I'll do like, I don't know if anybody remembers the old film strips in school where you had the record and the film strip and the record went beep when you were supposed to change the film. So I will beep and Carolyn can do it for me. So we can just page through these, Carolyn.
Okay.
So just for everybody's benefit, the basic timeline of the recent interactions with the Gatehouse. 2009, we were asked, of course, I wasn't there then, but Heritage Resource Management was asked to undertake an assessment. And there was, I gather, some disagreement about who and what and when was going to happen where. And of course, because the property is in private hands, that was more or less the end of that initiative, unfortunately. But then in 2018, there was another opportunity for city staff to go on site, but it was from all accounts a brief inspection. And although it produced some photos, which we can show you in a minute, it was not a proper engineering or architectural review. There's no opportunity for analysis or measurement or anything else. It was simply an opportunity to be inside. So great, but not sufficient. And at that time, the owner, again, I wasn't there, but I gather the owner expressed himself fairly forcefully as not being in favor of designation of the property. But notwithstanding that, of course, owing to its significance, it is in fact on the designation work plan and is slowly moving up the list in that work plan. So it's still the city's intention to designate it insofar as it is on the Municipal Heritage Committee work plan for designation. So some of the pictures from the outside, the current conditions, which of course, surprise, surprise, the structure has not restored itself in the last 10 or 15 years. We were waiting for that to happen, and clearly it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And again, just some of the patchwork repairs that have been done over the years. More details, we're losing mortar, the woodwork is taking a pounding, as you might expect. And some pictures of the interior. And when Carolyn and I were discussing this, she was kind enough to point out that although this doesn't look good, if you kind of eyeball the alignments of, for instance, the far right-hand picture up in the attic, there is no real evidence of the structure shifting or changing shape, nor are there cracks in the walls that would indicate that the structure is settling or distorting or racking. This is all the result of some water incursion and general neglect, but as a structure, it does not appear to be in peril, as unappealing as it might look from an aesthetic point of view at this point.
Yeah, without
if you want to add anything to that, Carolyn.
Without having a thorough engineering investigation, which would include getting into any kind of crawl space or attic space that was accessible, and perhaps doing some digging next to the foundation, it's very hard to know what the structural stability of the building is. These photographs mean nothing. I've seen worse structures than this that could be moved and could be restored. However, this also doesn't mean that this is stable. Like, there is much more work that would need to be done to make that determination.
And so there are a range of options to us, and I'll be the first person to say none of these are good in that none of them are either cheap or easy. But as I understand it now, these are the options in front of us. The first one, as always, is to do nothing. Never a desirable option, but always an option. The second one is to proceed with the designation as it is now currently before the Municipal Heritage Committee, and see what effect that has on the owner's perception of the city and its actions with regard to a structure that, for all of our interest in it, is a private structure on private property. The next option would be to offer to purchase what is a really a very small corner parcel from the larger lot from the owner. And then, because we would be the owners of the structure, proceed with designation and restoration, but in situ, right on that corner. And the fourth one is essentially to offer to make the owner's problem go away by gaining enough access to picking a structure up and taking it away and back to the grounds of Auchmar proper. None of these are without their consequences and without their complexities. And behind each one, of course, lies a particular approach to preservation and how it's accomplished, what it means, what the Ontario Heritage Trust's view of it is, what the national standards view of it is. And so that's the reason I said none of them are easy or cheap, but they are all potential courses of action. And I'll also say at this point that we as city staff have no opinion on this. We wanted to just use this opportunity to lay out the possibilities in front of you. And I think the next couple of slides have some work that Carolyn's done to just detail some of these options. If you want to go through that, Carolyn?
Yeah, so I worked up an estimated budget for some of the short-term work that we might be asked to do in the near future. And one of them included how much it would cost to get a heritage engineer there. So this is based on a quote from a person on my roster. So it would be about $4,500 to get a basic engineering review. That's not including any plans or architectural plans for any kind of adaptive reuse. This is just to determine what the structural issues are on the building. In order to do building prep, let's say it was decided that the building would be moved, we would need to do a designated substance report, and any removal that would be hazardous. There would need to be clearing of shrubs, etc., and that would be about $20,000. The move itself, if the building was, if we determined that that was the course of action and the building was structurally sound enough to move, this is based on a quotation from a company who does this kind of work. It would be $106,000 to move a building of that structure. That is from a quotation just based on the information that I provided. So that's, the contractor has never seen the building. They haven't seen a structural report. They haven't visited the site. This is just based on a photograph and a discussion. We would need a foundation to move the building to, and we're estimating about $75,000 in order to do that. We'd need to pay for permits. We'd need to make good the site on the former property. And so just to move the structure, not including any extras that might come out outside of the scope of work, would be about $222,000. That's just for the move.
And because of our lack of ability to do any sort of detailed analysis, these are all black box figures as well. And one has no idea what will happen once we get in there and start to peel things back and look at it. They could, I doubt they'll go down, they could go up, but these are all have a heavy asterisk at them at this point. As Carolyn said, the contractor hasn't even been on site to see the building yet. These are order of magnitude estimates.
Correct. We wanted to have some numbers to be able to make some decisions that were based on some kind of fact instead of just guessing. In our line of work, we don't move buildings very often. So this is not something I have any personal experience having done before. Other cost estimates. So we kind of blue skied and thought about what are the other things that we would need to do with the building. So we would need to do archaeology at Auchmar because we're legally mandated to do that. Archaeology is not an inexpensive endeavor. I'm estimating based on other projects we've done that it would cost between $100,000 and $150,000 to clear the footprint of the site that we wanted to put the foundation on, the new foundation. We would need a consultant in order to do the structural plans in order to get a building permit to be able to build the foundation. we need some very basic services in order to have hydro and perhaps heating or security service at the site. So we're estimating about 20,000 just for basic. We would like to do, if the money was available, some basic archaeology at the site of the gatehouse, because there is history there, and rather than allowing that history to be maybe damaged or covered up or dug out, we would like to be able to do that. So we estimated about 75,000 just for some basic archaeology there. Once the building is moved to Auchmar, we would have to protect it. Based on other security systems that we have in several locations, we estimate about $30,000 a year for more than a basic security system. There's active vandalism that happens at Auchmar, so it would be about 30,000 to get video surveillance that's actively monitored there. And then the restoration, I have no idea, frankly. I've never been inside the building, so I don't know really what the issues are. It looks like there's a fair amount of historic material left, even in the condition that it currently is. So it could be as little as 250,000. It could be as much as 500, depending on what the issues are and what the structure is. And that's just a number that I've picked for discussion purposes because I don't know. And until we have more information, it's hard, but I doubt it would be less than 250, just based on some other projects we've done that have similar conditions, similar issues to deal with. So as a gross estimate for restoration of the building, we're looking at about 480,000 to about 780,000, 85,000 to get that structure adaptively reused.
Just a mere drop in the bucket.
Drop in the bucket. Yeah.
Oh, come on, folks. That's not a high figure.
And then some other issues to consider. The owner may not be amenable to moving or selling the building because it is private
even
property.
speaking with us, you know,
Or
at this
speaking
point,
with
we
us.
don't know.
The structural integrity of the building is not known. And there's been no site visit by a heritage engineer because we don't own the building, and that hasn't been allowed in the past. The final scope of work hasn't been determined, so it's hard to assign a budget for restoration. There could be a wide range of things that could happen to that structure, and the cost will vary quite dramatically depending on what's decided. And the OHT does have an easement on the Auchmar property and may have some very strong opinions about us moving a structure that didn't exist in a historical situation on the property. So really the OHT would have to be in on the decision-making right from the beginning. And there is no funding in place for any of these things. There's no funding in place for an engineer, for moving, for stabilization, for archaeology, or for the restoration of the project. So both those things would have to be funded right from the beginning.
And so before we get to the questions, I wanted to say a couple of things as well. So as somebody who's relatively new to the situation, although I've had several discussions with Ian, who has filled me in on the long and complex and fascinating history of this property, both as a private structure and as a public heritage property. There are a couple of things I see when I look at this. One is that because I teach museum studies at U of T, this is probably the best case study you could ever give students, because this small structure, there's more complexity and more issues and more layers than you could put in if you develop this from scratch as a fake case study. So it is a complicated situation. If we had the time to just have a glass of wine and talk about it, there's some fascinating philosophical issues here that I see. One is, of course, that Orthodox or preservation orthodoxy says that original context is the highest value of all. And yet, in one sense, yes, it's in its original context. In the other sense, it's completely out of context because it was a gatehouse to country estate, and now it's on the corner of a suburban development. So, you know, you tell me which one is more appropriate contextually. There is no, at this point, and Diane mentioned the business plan, there is neither a business plan nor an interpretive plan for Auchmar, other than a general sense, and I'm assuming this is the point that we're all starting from, that the property is of unquestioned importance, and by association, so is the gatehouse. But beyond that, there is no clear vision. And I'm sure you all know that we are long past the point where the answer to a historic preservation challenge is simply to open something as a historic house museum. Like we've all done that. We currently at HRM have a surfeit of historic house museums. Not that we're giving any away, but we're certainly not looking for any more. And there is no future for a historic structure as a conventional house museum any longer. It is just a non-starter as an option because they can't make a living doing that. So there's the kind of moral good of saying this is a vital heritage structure. It has the potential to contribute to the public good. It has the potential to speak to the heritage and texture and life of the city. But there's a long way from where we are now to where we go and how we get there. And along the way, we need not only a business plan, we need an interpretive plan, which is to say a vision for what this structure is and what it does, because it needs a job to do. Otherwise, we won't be able to do this. And there are many forms that job could take, ranging in scale of intervention, ranging in magnitude of changes to the site, philosophically driven by, do you take the dormitory and the chapel off, or do you attempt to embrace the whole complexity of the site? And unless those questions are addressed, an interpretive planning process is typically how you would do that. It's really difficult to formulate a business plan because there's no business for which you can formulate a plan, right? There's no sense of what's public access, how you set up a kind of revenue generation stream on the site that fuels all the good stuff that we all want to do, and what's the mix of business lines on that site that make that place viable. And we are not we're not holding back anything on you at this point. As Carolyn said, we're not holding back any money. There is no money at this point for this project. And yes, that might be tied to us not having brought a plan forward to council, but you all know the context of the last 8 months, right? And so this is not an opportune time to be coming forward with major capital asks, no matter how good they are. So we have some time to think about this, but the strongest possible case to go forward would be a compelling vision of the use of this site and its integration into the life of the city, along with a sound business plan that shows at least some way of recovering some, if not all of the costs, and at least being revenue neutral, if not actually making a little bit of money. And within that, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities. We don't have any answers, but as heritage professionals, we have some sense of the questions that we could ask. And so if you ask me as a relative newcomer to the scene, well, what do you think we should do? I would suggest respectfully that the first thing we need to do is hammer out some kind of vision for what this property is and what it does and how it functions as a structure with a life and a use and a purpose, and a realistic operating budget and a capital maintenance plan and all of the things that go towards making buildings last. We have some experience with this because, of course, we get to look after Dundurn Castle and our other historic structures, and we can bring that knowledge to bear, and that will help with budgeting. But it won't help with the larger question of what is this place, what does it mean, and how do we take that to a public audience, which is really the mission of heritage resource management, is to bring history to an audience in a vibrant and participatory and safe and ethical public way. So right now, that's where we are. And having said that to you, you know what we know at this point about the challenges in front of us. And having said that and made my little speech, I guess now we can open it up to questions, and both Carolyn and I would be happy to chat and
So,
talk about where we go from here.
John, on behalf of everyone and Carolyn, this is very, very much appreciated. It is, I guess I'm not the oldest person in this room or in this meeting, but I've probably been working at it since about mid 1900s. And for me, I know we have to move forward, but to see a site that sits from 1995 till today, if we did that to any of our buildings or our homes, we'd be in deep trouble. So in moving forward, I understand the liabilities that are ahead of us, the vandalism, the questions that are asked all the time. What are you doing with it? Why isn't it fixed up? And right now with the pandemic, money is certainly not going to, as far as I know, heritage preservation. So there's several people here who I know have worked on Auchmar for years. Nina Chappell is one, and I'd like Nina maybe to comment on what you both said, and certainly Robin, who is on the Municipal Heritage Committee, who's putting this forward. I just need to ask Carolyn Priamo. Carolyn, would you like to do your presentation first and then have the questions? Carol?
Yeah, I could do that because it follows actually from this particular PowerPoint presentation. As you know, it is more photographs that are comparative and a new resource that we have. So maybe that would be a good idea.
Oh, John, Carolyn agree. Is that all right? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I just need to share my screen. Oops. You get to see my entire computer here. No, that's not it. Wait a second. That's not it, is it? Yeah, that's it. Okay. But it's not in the right place. No. I'm sorry.
Carolyn,
I don't
we
have
go.
sharing experience.
Oh, that looks great.
You're up on screen now, Carol.
Oops. What, Chris? No, Chris. The slideshow. This one? Yeah. Okay. It's coming.
Okay.
But it's Chris.
Perfect.
Sorry. It's
That's
backwards.
perfect.
no, it's backwards. That's the end.
It's the end, yes. How did that? I had it all set. I don't get it. Go up to the top.
Oh, right there.
Where?
Right there.
Right here, Chris. There. Okay.
Up, that one.
This one? Okay. Ah,
Carol, you're on.
all that green. Now I did this purposely because we're all, you know, sort of hemmed in and walled up. And so I like to do my PowerPoints with lots of color. And I thought this green was very nice because, as you know, the gatehouse is very green right now. So I'll just continue on. This is just a title page showing a particular photo from the 1960s, I believe, or the 80s. It comes up again. Here it is. What I'm doing is I'm giving some of the earlier shots and a few more photos as we go along in time until the present day. So this is views from 1980, and these are photos that have been supplied by Nina Chappell, and they're really terrific because they have the west facade, they have all the facades. These are the three main ones. In this one over here, you get the south and the west facade in one. This is the east facade. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm always doing that. Go backwards, right? Okay, Chris. Left arrow, left arrow. Hey, okay. Yeah, so just if you want to just have a little look at these, I don't know if you've seen them, but I think they're, as photographs, I think they're very beautiful and really show off the gatehouse in a beautiful sort of idyllic way. So good, and these are great to compare with the way it is now. So we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, now this is another one here. It's not Nina's, but it was in Carolyn's. I believe it was in Carolyn's and maybe John's as well. This one on the left, the northwest view. It also is a very terrific photo of it when it was, you know, not covered, but it was obviously had a plaque at that time, so you can sort of date that. The one up here is actually looking like quite a bit older one. I don't know what the date of that is, and I don't know where it's from. This one down here is Historical Hamilton has it on their website, but this one here is kind of, to me, a transition in that they now have changed this upper gable window and expanded it to the point where, of course, it isn't at all close even to the original, except that it has a point on it, and that's about it. It almost looks like they extended the sides and kept the center. So it's a lot of glass for that area. Now we just go into the next one. Now these are the measure drawings that Nina has been able to provide as well from, I believe it's the planning department. These were done by the University of Toronto students a while ago, and they are, again, quite useful and, you know, very, very clear representations of all the views of the gatehouse. So I'll just go through those and you'll see here's the north elevation again. That would be facing north on the corner. This is the west elevation, which is on the other corner. I'm just trying to see that. I'll make sure you can see. Okay, and then there are two others, the south elevation and the east elevation. So, you know, those those really simplify all the features of the building, and I think it's great that we do have these now. Now, these are photographs which I took with Diane in just this summer in June. So they are maybe close to the most recent of the photographs we have. So I think these will just be immediately evident. There's immediately evident that it's just getting kind of more and more overgrown, and it's getting more and more dilapidated every time you go and take photographs of it. So this is to compare with the previous photos, which I said are some of them are very idyllic. This is the north face, and this is the this is actually the southwest face. You can see that the plaque's there, so this would be the west face. I'm sorry about that. I made a little error there. It's not the south face, it's the west face. Okay, then we go into what I did was I looked at my pictures, which I took quite a few details of that day, even though it was very difficult to see. But I took some details of the barge boards and, you know, the main entrance door at the north end, you know, the windows, just the step, some pictures that were already shown by the previous presentation. And so I just wanted to highlight some points here that there's, of course, it's quite obvious that there's excess overgrowth. It obscures the view, but it's also it impacts the walls. And yeah, I think anybody knows, pretty much anybody who owns a house knows that, you know, you don't really want a lot of, you know, of this landscaping or whatever. This may be not landscaping, this might landscaping gone wild, to be growing into and onto various elements of the roof and hanging over. And it's dangerous too, you know, if something, you know, gets hit with lightning, and it's very risky. And then I've mentioned the window again, which has been replaced, and of course does change that view. And naturally, it would be great if that could be changed back. And I imagine it wouldn't be that hard, because now I see that the center portion is probably the original window shape. Have the decorative woodworking, and I believe you had a photograph like that too in your presentation, just showing where it's missing and rotting. So, and then the main north door, like naturally is kind of in very rough shape. And there's stucco wall cladding, which shows up in the early pictures. It's falling off, and the brick is showing it's over here. Just a few of the details. And then this is two of the pictures that you already showed as well, provided by Robin McKee, of the interior of this. And this was last year, so not long ago either. Very, very much up to date. I hate to end on a sort of a sad note, but that's it for my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Now, with your permission, we'll turn it over for questions, maybe to get everything started. Nina, would you have comments?
Oh, thank you, Diane. Yes, I think one of the things to remember, and it's because you talked about the mid 20th century being interested in it since well, those measured drawings were done by students at the University of Toronto in 1958. And the Gatehouse was one of, I think, about a dozen buildings chosen because of the heritage value to have these measured drawings done. And we came across it through the ACO, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and the Hamilton buildings. We had copies of them, but it was, I think it's just fascinating. It was a time that the Gatehouse was considered one of the prize locations. And it's because I think one is it's so unusual, and it's miniature. And when I went through it in 1980 with the people that lived there kept it so beautifully, and they had, the gardens were wonderful. They got a Trillium Award sometime later after that. They kept it up, but they were quite short, and everything was kind of small, and it was of a piece. And we talked to them then about designating. That shows you how long we've been looking at that building. And it's not the same now, but it's so important. Well, it's a gatehouse to an estate, and a mid-19th century estate. And basically, there are not many of those. So it's certainly, my opinion, it's extremely worthy of taking a very close look at it before it's lost. And obviously, the intention of the owner, in my opinion, is that he just wants to let it disappear, and he can't really see it from his own property. So I've never talked to that owner. I don't believe he owned it in 1980. I don't know how the two properties got put together, but anyway, they've been put together. But I guess my point really is that it's been regarded ever since there was conservation in Hamilton as an important site. So then comes the problem of how to deal with it. I agree totally with John's approach that it has to have a use, it has to have vision for it. But nobody's gone there yet to think about that. I think that's really important to look at that.
When Carolyn and I were talking with some of our colleagues, the feeling was, because of the way the last interaction with the owner, a couple of interactions with the owner ended, we agree we need to make a new approach, but I feel like we get one chance to make that new approach because there's not a great history there. And I, for one, not knowing who's going to make that approach, we need a real consensus about what we're going to ask for, because I don't think we're going to get a second chance. So I need absolute clarity about what it is we're asking them to do, not just to tell us it's important or tell him it's important, but to say, here is a proposal, what do you think? So that's what I was saying before about arriving at some sort of consensus about an approach here, because if he just slams the door in our face again, then we are honestly out of options. And I'm not speaking for the city, but I am speaking for the city. There is zero appetite at the city for expropriation at this point, which is just a giant blunt instrument that will not, because if we try to expropriate it, that's when the structure falls down in the middle of the night mysteriously. So the one chance we still have in front of us needs to have a coordinated sort of consensus-based strategy for what it is we need to do. Just my thought.
Thank you, John. Does someone else have a question? Or Nina, do you want to say anything else?
Just one sentence. I've known an awful lot of owners to let a heritage building be moved off of property for $1. I mean, for them, it's saving money. So that might be.
And of the things on our list, that may be the most viable is, if you let us do this, we will just make this go away and you can do whatever you want to with your little corner lot. Yeah. But as Carolyn said, there's a few zeros between us and even just to make it go away, never mind giving it a useful life on the other property. However, if that is determined to be the course of action, then we have an agreed on course of action, and then we can start to plan for how to bring that about. So
thank you, John.
Not saying it's impossible. It's just there are none of these are obvious choices right now.
Diane, it's Richard. May I ask a question? John, that was fabulous overview of a process to get us from A to B, and it was really helpful. So thank you very much for all the
You're
time
welcome.
and energy that you put into it, obviously thinking through. And I love the idea of having different options in front of us. The takeaway that I had, and I got this from Nina too, emphasized it, and I think our board would agree, it's one thing to have a plan, but first you have to have a vision of the area there. So that was very helpful. Do you have some thoughts? I'm thinking of the vision writ large, not simply the vision for the gatehouse, but the broader vision for Auchmar. And we've come at it in different ways, and maybe we always put the plan before the vision. In your experience, and open it up to others on your team, do you have some strategies on a way forward that has some urgency to it, that's effective, that's inclusive, of course, but brings the right stakeholders to the table to get that vision done, so we can move on to the planning and the resourcing? Do you have any thoughts and experience on getting to a vision in an effective way?
We're actually having this discussion about some larger plans we're working on for a slightly new direction for heritage resource management. And I'm all about public engagement and public consultation, but those go better when you ask people to respond to something as opposed to just asking them what they think. Because if you ask them what they think, they'll tell you it's nice, right? So we will do that, absolutely, because there would need to be definitely a broad-based process for responding to a vision of what that place could be. But I would suggest that it would be the people around this table and others who share a similar interest in the property that need to develop one or two scenarios to then essentially take out in focus group, because a public consultation will not give you a meaningful scenario because it's not their job to do that. So we would need to say, on a spectrum from 100% preservation as is unaltered to 100% adaptive reuse, and then somewhere in between, we would need to develop those and take them forward, and that's the basis then for public engagement and consultation.
It's great. That's really educational
So,
for me.
because I need to respond to, it's like a survey. You need a good survey question to respond. Otherwise, the data you get back doesn't mean anything. So there is still work for us, and I include all of us on the inside of this, on our side of the fence. There's still work for us to do to develop those options, because then I can also take that to Carrie and take it to Jason, field test it with some counselors, and get a response to that before we go public with it.
And we were so encouraged, when Diane and others met with the team, and you presented this approach before, so you're very consistent with this way of working, which is very.
I only have so many ideas, I think.
There's so many ideas, and to say that others can circle in with you, members of this. I'm looking at the screen here, and those with a history and a real interest. I think there'd be a very strong appetite to link arms and support each other towards creating a vision that could be workshop, or visions that could be workshop. But to have us involved in the beginning would be a lot of fun, and I think very effective.
And to Diane's mention of other similar properties, I mean, I walk my dog past Pauletta Mansion every weekend, right? And there's another example of a house and a grounds that makes a living, but is still a character defining element for Lakeshore, and is open and accessible, but has a life. And I'm not suggesting this become a wedding venue, but that to me would be an effective preservation solution, whether it's the right one for Auchmar or not. So it would need to be something that works on that level to keep this, to keep this viable.
Thank you.
And John, as you're saying, it's unique. We know, unless we're incorrect, that there are two dovecotes in Canada, one at Dundurn and one at Auchmar. There was one on the West Coast, which is gone, and one on the East Coast, which is being changed. So do we know how many gatehouses there are in Canada?
Yeah, I would imagine there's a few in private hands that just don't show up on a scan of, public heritage resources. Having grown up in Vancouver, I know that In some of the larger estates in Shaughnessy and places, there are definitely gatehouses, but they wouldn't show up as because it's just part of someone's house at this point. But yeah, we're all we're all here because we think this is significant. And that's a starting point, but it's by no means an ending point. And so I don't want to pawn our work as staff onto you, but I would love to have you sort of see it from my point of view. And once we agree that it's important, it's like, that's when the hard part starts. And for the manager's chair, that's what I see in front of me, is the need to identify alternatives, to test them with people, to build a consensus, to find resources, to put a viable project together. And on its own merits, that won't happen on its own, right? It needs our help to pull that together.
Thank you. Other questions? Terry. John Kajas does a lot of traveling around Ontario. John?
The best way I can go about it is that if every building, let's call it Belgardner, whether it be Annandale or Auchmar or Griffin House or Dundurn, when it's saved from a ruins and readapted, whether it be an active living museum or an educational museum or things like that, it serves a purpose. I look at Castle Loma to an extent as well, in the sense that, yes, it was a huge building which peaked and then fell into a valley and then had to reinvent itself. And how it reinvented itself was through many of the things that John mentioned. It was not just one specific purpose. It was a multi-purpose venue. Some of it, what I would call hard use, in saying, yeah, we're booking 100 weddings a year type of a thing, or we're doing 50 socials a year in the library at Castle Loma. For Auchmar, I would see it much more differently. I would term it soft use, smaller groups, and, you have to keep the film shoots going and things like that.
What's interesting about Castle Loma is even Henry Pellet couldn't keep the damn thing going with all of his resources, right? And of course, kitty corner to Castle Loma is Spadina, which is the other end of the extreme, right? It's a full-on historic house museum with costumed interpretation and all the stuff that goes with it. So it's a great case study in those two approaches. And, for all that the Kiwanis Club ran the building into the ground, if it wasn't for the Kiwanis Club, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there to talk about. It would have been gone a long time ago.
Sure it would.
So yeah, it's a fascinating question.
And Terry. Terry, you're a world traveler. Do you have an honor for Carolyn?
You're superimposing yourself, are you, Terry?
Can he hear? Has he muted his mic? Terry. Terry, do you have a question or a comment?
Oh,
we
I'm
can't
not hearing you, Terry, for some reason.
Muted. He's looking for other earphones.
Yeah.
Oh, go on to the next person.
I can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, that's good.
Working.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh. Well, while we're waiting for him, Nina may remember that before the Gatehouse was sold to the current owner, Heritage Hamilton Foundation with Grant Head spoke with the then owner, Howard Mark, and his sister. And Howard wanted, Grant Head wanted Heritage Hamilton Foundation to purchase it, but instead something happened and it was purchased by the current owner. And John Summers has let me know, and so is through our counselor, John Paul Danko's office, know that they are separate lots. They're not together, they are separate, even though they're the same owner. Now, I did talk to the owner probably 15, 20 years ago, walking along that street with my husband and Grant Head and Brenda Head. And he was in the back, and I started walking up the driveway, and all the others said, I wouldn't go back there, but I did. He was very nice, and he said he was hoping to make it a nanny suite, but he decided it wasn't appropriate. Now, at one of the doors open, I met someone called Betty Cool, Nina, and she said she and her family lived there. She was an infant after Doug Embleton lived there. Do you remember the name of the people who lived?
Yeah, I think that's right. It was
Betty Cool. So she,
not as the owner, must have been a child of this person, I think, in 1980.
I don't, she was at the open doors open, and then someone came to speak to me, and I couldn't find her, but her son is Stuart or something, and he said he was very interested in Auchmar and the Gatehouse. So I think John Summers and Carolyn, maybe that's one of our projects we can help with and find out. We know the history of Doug Embleton living there. We don't have any history of Betty Cool's family living there. I've looked up all the Cools, but I haven't had the courage to phone them. But maybe I'll do this after this meeting, John and Carolyn, because you've really piqued my my vision. So is Terry there now?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's better.
So Terry, we want to know if you've got questions, ideas, or comments.
Well, I just sort of a question or a comment that I'm not sure from John's comments, which were great, but who's really could spearhead something like the Gatehouse project? Like, we're here as a group, Friends of Auchmar, to help. I don't know if we're expected to spearhead that, or does that come from the city, or I'm not really sure. Where does it start?
In an ownership sense, I mean, it's a city asset, and Carolyn and I, it's the city that signs our paychecks every 2 weeks. So it is our project, but it is also not something that the two of us are going to undertake from nose to tail, right? Because it's a public asset. And so there needs to be it will end up being a large and complex project to bring this thing to where we all want it to be. And I'm speaking now of the entire complex, not just the Gatehouse. Yeah. But overall, yes, I mean, the city has professional project management capacity, but it will not be solely a city project. I don't know, Carolyn, if you have any thoughts about that, or.
What a nice man. Yeah.
Like when we think,
dinner, we'll talk after dinner, okay?
I don't know if maybe we can get someone
muted.
I don't know who's
Baloney. Make it then. Don't know yet, Tim.
Is it possible to mute everyone?
Yeah.
From a planning point of view, there's a reason why Auchmar is not an easily it's not a project that has been easy to bring to fruition. If it were easy, it would have been done many years ago. The problem is there's many layers of complex planning and complex funding and thought processes that have to happen. And it's challenged everyone before me, and probably in the next short amount of time, the years ahead of us, people will be challenged by the project. It's very difficult. Even when you're not dealing with historic structures, if you were just dealing with modern buildings to do a project that large, it's a difficult project. But we're dealing with all kinds of other issues that have to do with the values that the community places on it, which makes it even more difficult to do. So we have the capacity to be able to do that both in heritage resource management. We do work on complex projects, but it's not up to us to make the decisions that council has to be behind the project. There has to be funding that can be accessed that doesn't unduly burden taxpayers, and there has to be planning behind that. So we have the capacity to do that, but as John said, it needs to be a team of people working together with the same vision.
That's great.
Councillor, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you are here, and I mean, your constituents, what is the neighborhood, what are the people who live in the area think about the site and its potential or visions for its use?
I think overall there's a strong support for some sort of adaptive reuse. I think people are, aware that it's there, probably not really that aware of what it is or what it means. I know around council, there's a very, very strong support for Auchmar in general. And believe the direction that that was last passed was working on that adaptive reuse plan and business case for the main site. Now, I don't know if that officially extends to the gatehouse, but it would make sense that the two are somewhat tied together. I think the question comes down to, well, actually, I have kind of two questions here. So the first is that right now the gatehouse itself is working through the designation process for heritage designation. And that the last update I saw, Robin, you might be able to update us on this, but the last update I saw was that it was on the work plan for the Heritage Committee, and it was working its way through, and it can be designated with or without the owner's blessing. But does that cause problems if we then want to move it off-site if it's designated? So, and does that also add complications that the owner will, cause some friction there, and they might not give permission to something that they would otherwise, get it out of here, right? So there's a bit of complications there with the designation part of it that I hadn't really considered before. And the other part of it is I can come to the table with some funding from the Ward 8 Area Rating Reserve. I can fund capital works to the tune of, several $100,000, not millions, but some seed capital. And looking at the price to move the gatehouse, $750,000 is not unachievable. But to John's point, the real question is then what? So if we were to come up with that funding and move it to the Auchmar proper property, council's not going to support that if there's not a vision in place for that site. So to just restore it and plop it over there is not something that we're going to invest, $750,000 in. There has to be that overall vision. And then the other part of that is if we are going to come to the table with money, and I, like I said, I do have some money that I can make available, and but is it best to invest that in the gatehouse? Or is it best to invest that in the main house and the main site, if knowing that you have that limited funds available? And I think that's some of the questions that need to be answered through development of the main vision and the business plan before we make a decision on the future of one or the other.
That's very helpful. Terry, any comments on that? Oh, he's muted.
Diane?
Yes.
May I make an additional comment? I'm hearing from all of our speakers, including the counselor. I don't know if there's consensus with all the people around the screen here, applauding the work of Carolyn and John and the team. Exceptional. And we're hearing words like, well, it's a team approach and so forth. It's so great to hear, and it just makes a lot of sense. I remember years ago struggling with a problem that was just so enormous, and a friend who worked with one of the school boards said, whenever I have a problem, Richard, that's large, I pull a committee together. We put a little bit of structure around that committee, a bit of a process to get some things done. And all of a sudden I feel the weight off of my shoulders, and there's others around the table, and we have a process, and we can usually get to the finish line that way. So I'm just wondering if we could work with you, John, and with the counselor and with others to just put a process in place, not to push you too hard. That's not what our role here is to do, but to encourage and to support. We obviously fully understand that it's city property. We fully understand our role to support. We're just trying to get to a place where there's a process and some timelines and maybe some resources, counselor, for a team to work together to get that vision in place. I don't know, John or Carolyn, what your response to that sort of approach would be?
I think one of the things that the city is probably equipped to contribute at the outset of this is to just frame the scope of the issue, right? To set up what in philosophical terms is a problem statement, right? Like, what are we actually doing and what
Yeah.
are the steps towards making progress. And that's something that I think, Carolyn, I'm not misspeaking. I think, she and I could at least frame that, and we'd know what we don't know and what we need to know and the points at which a decision would need to be made. I mean, there's certainly a role for all that I've sat here and talked about grim practicalities. In my experience with these things, there's also a role for just sitting around and talking about ideas unfettered by reality, because what happens is if reality intrudes too soon, you constrain the idea making process. But if you let the ideas run for a while, what can happen is an idea comes out of that that's so compelling that people who earlier on, if it was more practical, wouldn't step forward to support it because it would be too sensible and a very Canadian sort of sensible solution. But if you let the ideas run, and if that process is facilitated, which again, I think is the role that we could play as the city, right? And we collect and filter and sort and categorize the ideas, out of that may come something that is then a compelling enough thing to take forward to a larger forum.
Wonderful.
And it would need to be solutions plural, as I said before, along some kind of spectrum, right? From, we'll define this end, and we'll pick a couple of waypoints, because if you just do one, then it's an all or nothing. It's an all or nothing bet, which is not a sound strategy either in poker or in, heritage preservation. So we could build the bones of a process, yes, and outline what would need to occur and when, I think.
That would be
Just in a project sense, right, Carolyn? I mean,
that'd be a great way. That would be a great way to do it. And then we know that we're plugging into a process and how we can support it, and that yet there's a little bit of a not an over formal process to it, but we know that there's on ramps and off ramps, and there's something that we're trying to accomplish together in a certain period of time with a certain number of resources. Would just be great for us as we do our planning too, John. And we're trying to make sure that we're making the most effective use of our experience and time and knowledge.
I mean, if this is a giant committee meeting, we would propose an agenda, and the first item of business would be to adopt the agenda, right? So we would create that agenda in our estimation, and with Carolyn's knowledge of other similar projects. I'm a maritime person by training and profession, and normally I do this with historic ships and boats, and it's even more complicated because they'll sink if you don't pay attention to them. But there again, you can't just tie it up with a dock and charge admission. Like, it needs to do something. So I have been through this with other similar size projects. It's just that they were afloat, not on land, and I have some sense of it. And then Carolyn, of course, has a considerable wealth of project management experience nursing these things along to completion. So I think we could endeavor to come back with that.
We're so enthused. I can't speak for the whole, Diane, for the whole board of directors, but we were so enthused by John meeting you and your enthusiasm and your knowledge and your capacity to get these things done. It's just so exciting. And then Carolyn, we obviously have known for years. So to join hands with you would be great.
And that project management, I like that. I'm glad. I'm going to get rid of grim, what is it, practicalities. I don't.
If I could jump in there for a second.
Yeah.
Just based on what John and Richard were talking about, just based on what John and Richard were talking about, you're looking at something. What's the end use of the place? That's what you're looking at, and will it be something that'll captivate people? Now, when I think of as you were talking, I was thinking about the Gatehouse, and all I could see was just writers in residence, artist studio, stuff like that.
Well, the other example that comes to mind, and it's one end of the spectrum, but is the Film Center on Bayview in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
This beautiful estate that turned into a place of learning and creativity.
Sure.
There's another. Yeah. Now, Councillor, I don't know, there's an OBL item, right? I mean, we have been asked to do something we have not yet done. Does that encompass what we're talking about here, or would it be worthwhile to have us be re-asked again and revisit that item to just make it a bit more specific? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, the outstanding business item is to develop a business plan for the Auchmar property.
Yeah.
I don't believe it specifically includes the gatehouse, so that's something I think we can take offline to review.
Yeah.
I mean, the gatehouse is intrinsically part of Auchmar, so I'm not sure if we need to parse that out. But if that does require, additional direction at council, then we can work with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious as to where we stand now, just in order to make this real.
I think Robin's hand's up, Diane.
Oh, I can't see. Yeah, Robin, go ahead.
I agree totally with the counselor in this sense, and John, and the idea that the gatehouse should not be called the gatehouse. It should be called Auchmar's Gatehouse. And that way it is part of the estate. And when the business plan was put forward, it was only for the property and the grounds, and this kind of put the gatehouse on its the orphan list. And so now, because it is under duress with the vegetation and with the neglect and the problem that we have with the new owner, it is in distress. It was only going to be looked at by the Municipal Heritage Committee. I pushed it up to the red zone. And at this point, the designation for the property is going forward. It was supposed to be last year in 19. It's now been rescheduled for 20. One of the ones that was the first one in the list to go is the brakes were put on it. And at the last Municipal Heritage Committee, it was supposed to be bumped up to number 1. So that's what the staff would be looking at to get the gatehouse designated. To answer the question of the counselor about does the designation have a problem with the moving, and designated properties have been moved in the past. What the designation is so that the property owner or a developer cannot demolish it. And so in situ, it will be designated even if the owner disagrees with it. But the point was to save it from that midnight demolition. And that will still make it a designated property under the Heritage Act and save it in situ. But that doesn't mean it cannot be moved because it's designated. I've talked to the Ontario Heritage Trust, and they are in favor of saving it. And they have also given me examples of designated properties that have been moved onto a heritage site like Auchmar. Now, when you think about adapted reuse, at the gatehouse in the 13th Battalion idea was to have it as a gatehouse on Fennel. And that would be where the tickets for rounds or tours and everything would first go through. But that is probably the best location for it, for if you think beyond the move or the city designation. Ruthven has a gatehouse right here in Caledonia. And that gatehouse by the Lower Grand River Land Trust was taken over and used as their business office for years and years and years. And what happened is that it channeled people into that gatehouse and away from the mansion. And that way it was where you did your business, where you did all your organization, and it worked. And it saved the mansion from more and more people going to it. And it gave us the opportunity to open the mansion for tours. And so to have a smaller, like a mini Auchmar at Fennel entranceway would be a boost, because you're actually going into a designated property on a designated site, and giving people the idea that you've got a 2-for-1 here. You get into a designated, restored, adapted, reuse designated property, and you can see the mansion behind it and have an outside tour. And that will keep the inside of the mansion stronger and better and give us time. The list of stuff that has to be done to move a designated property in this case is long, but you can do it in little pieces. And so the amount of money isn't all at once. And so you have a little piece here and a little piece here and a little piece here. It takes time and it takes money. But the idea is that you can fix something and make it proper and reuse it in a sequential way. And you don't have to dump it all at once. And that's where the councilors got upset when you said it was going to be $12,000 to restore Auchmar, and ooh, that's too much. And it is. You don't have to have $12,000 in your pocket at the time. We did Ruthven with only $1 million, and it still is viable today. And the interest from the $1 million was used on projects as it went forward, and it is a national historic site.
Having had the pleasure of actually teaching a class in the coach house at Ruthven, I mean, that's a beautiful, character-filled, revenue-producing space. And, you know, Auchmar has a coach house, and by virtue of it not having an interior, it's a major asset because it gives you all the niceness of looking heritage, but we can do whatever the heck we want inside without doing violence to any sort of history. So maybe that's another point of leverage to then phase this site in. You're right. You're right. And I think the more we discuss it, the more that's the kind of thing that will emerge. And if Carolyn and I have built a framework, this can start to get fitted into it as a series of options.
That's where I'm at, John, is so exciting, all of these ideas, and they percolate, and they could go on and on and on. There's no end to that. The framework that you're going to provide to help us channel some of the enthusiasm and the ideas and vet them against some criteria would be really helpful. And I think it'd be helpful to you because you're able to really benefit from the enthusiasm and skills and knowledge of the table here, but not to be overwhelmed with all sorts of ideas that might be out of scope.
Yeah.
So that framework is just so vital. I'm speaking personally here, would be so vital to this process.
The other trick of the business plan, of course, this comes up with museum feasibility studies all the time, is you don't care, nobody cares about year one. Year one's going to be great because it's brand new. Year 5, year 6, and year 7 are the critical ones because that's when, you know, the novelty's worn off and it needs to be a steady state, sustainable operation like that. And often, though, those studies don't get pushed out to year 8. They end at year 3. Well, that's easy to do, but it's the pushing it ahead to year 7 and year 10. And so when you do a business plan, I would suggest that it needs to go out a fair ways. And maybe, Robin, that involved, maybe that's when the phasing is done, right, in year 10 or something. But it needs to have some durability and some length to it like that in order to be truly feasible. And just saying, well, we'll get it open, then we'll hope for the best is not a route to success for those things.
Robin, to follow up with what you just said, you know, buildings have been moved, heritage buildings. What do you and John know? Maybe it was before John moved here, about moving Mohawk Trail. It was designated.
Done by the education people. Yeah.
Much better shape, was it?
Pardon me?
Was it much better condition? Mohawk Trail? Maybe Carolyn knows.
Yeah, it was open for the public for doors open, and it was done by the Education Association. They actually owned it, and the education people moved it to their new location. And so it was movable. It was on a stone foundation. It was in better shape, and it wasn't better shape because they took care of it. It was brick, and they didn't have vandals. There seems to be a, or in this case, an owner that
doesn't
not there, right?
So as far as the structure of the gatehouse, let's not assume anything because the photographs in the appearance on the outside tell us nothing about the structure. The building is a brick building, but I can't tell until somebody gets in there what the foundation issue is, whether there's a sill plate, whether there's a post and beam structure in there. Because jacking up a building like that and putting it onto a truck, you have to be able to have something they can jack up. If there's nothing underneath the building and it's been built in such a way that they can't lift it, then it has to be taken apart. So until an engineer gets in there, we can't make an assumption one way or the other. I don't know.
And that's the engineering consulting that we need to have first testing.
Yeah. Carolyn, may I ask a question, and then how are we doing time-wise? And I think Pat and John Buchanan may have questions. When hopefully it's designated, does there have to be any recording of the state of the building when it's designated?
Well, just as part of the practice of anything we do, we always do full documentation before we make any changes. So that would be part of what we would do on any project. So before you move it, we would want to document everything. We would likely want to take out anything that was liable to be damaged or would go missing during the move. There might be some masonry elements that would have to be taken down and labeled and put into boxes in order to keep them safe on the move. But I haven't been in the building, so I don't know. I don't know what those options would be or what we might have to do. We have a full roster of qualified engineers and architects that we use on all projects. So I would be bringing in experts on any job that I did. So I can't really say, but I assure you that were this a project assigned to us, we would do our best to make sure all documentation was there. And Diane, I would do that if it was not designated. It doesn't matter to me that it's designated. I treat all the heritage structures we have the same. It's just the basis of the way we do business. So the designation is to keep the public face of what goes on there with regulation. I have buildings that are not designated and we still do all those things. So.
And that's why those control points in the process are so important, right? So until this and this are done, nothing goes forward. And that there clearly there would be several of those.
Thank you, John.
People believe that the gatehouse is designated already because of the provincial plaque that's there.
Yeah.
And so with that public image of it, it seems to be okay to take it forward as a designation under the Heritage Act, even without the owner's permission.
Can I just put, Diane, I know we're getting short on time. Can I just put one more thing on the table?
Mm-hmm.
So we are, actually, I'm in the process of writing a report that's going back to GIC for November 18th, because at the last GIC meeting last month, we were asked to come back with a plan for celebrating Hamilton's 175th anniversary, which is next year in 2021. And it was decided that the best way to do that is through a virtual commemoration, which will give us, HRM, web real estate. And web real estate is a lot cheaper than real estate. And it's a way to feature all sorts of assets that either we can't show people or we can't take people through, or that are currently invisible parts of the city's history. And I see this as a chance for Balfour and for Auchmar and for some of these sorts of things to take up some real estate. So if this is approved by council in November, we will be back at your door saying we would like to include Auchmar in what we're doing online. And so just a note that that's coming up. And I think it's a huge opportunity to get some of this story out and to speak to this point of, well, what is its current status? What could it become? What do you think? Do you have memories to share? All of that sort of engagement stuff, which can only help build a constituency for the work that we're going to do, and the eventual appeal for funds as well, which will certainly be a part of this.
Virtual, we don't always like, but this is going to be a plus. Yeah. John, I'm just going to see if Pat or John Buchanan have any questions for you. Pat?
No, I'm fine. Very informative.
Okay.
Great presentation.
John Buchanan? No. All right. Then
can I ask a quick question, Diane?
Sure. Oh, Deborah, sorry, I apologize.
Just a quick question about the engineering review. If it was possible to get an engineer, a real engineer, to do the review free gratis, would that be allowed? Like, would the city accept that review if he was a Eng, but he did it as a volunteer?
I think Carolyn will say they have to be approved by the city and you have to get onto the owner's land. Carolyn?
So yes, we would have to have permission from the owner to be able to enter his land, which I believe John will be working on that.
Yeah, that's kind of next.
Kind of next on the land. Part of my concern about having an engineer, even if he's well regarded and has, a large career behind him, is that there is a difference in expertise amongst different engineers. Some specialize in heritage buildings. The I do have a roster of people that I'm familiar with. I know what their background is. And there's one person in particular that I have that deals with vernacular structures in Ontario. And he has a lot of experience dealing with small buildings that are both on farmsteads and things that are built in unusual ways. And I would use him on this project. I'm not sure what the qualifications of your friend would be. I have a procurement process that I go through that is, I have to have approval to be able to hire things, and we go through a roster process for this particular kind of work. So it's not impossible, but we would have to talk more about what that entailed.
It's just that I know a lot of engineers from the work that I've done over the years. So there's possible that I may be able to get somebody interested. So I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, at this point, the engineering review isn't really the dollar amount that's holding us back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. And Pat and Dennis, I didn't include you. Have you got some questions before we move on?
I thought you did include me, Diane, and I said no. But I have thought about a question since I said no, and that has to do with the owner of the Gatehouse property. Just wondering, what do we know about him? Is there any way we could do some research and determine how we would appeal to his community spirit? And even if he doesn't give it away, that he willingly participates in the process.
Well, I guess that's John's job.
Yeah, I think, and that'll be part of our, as I said before, we'll get one chance to do this, and that'll be part of our preparation to make sure that we have thought of every possible contingency before we go in, for sure.
So you'll think about his personal life.
Well, you know what? We'll dig up as much as we're legally able to do that might aid us in bringing him on to the cause of preservation. I don't care what he does in his free time. I just care about his views on the Gatehouse.
Absolutely.
At Patricia Baker and Dennis Baker, are you still there?
Yep, they're there.
Yes, we're still here. We're still here. My battery was running way down, and so I had to put it over somewhere where you didn't really want to have it on. So that's fine. No, we're a great presentation. I don't have any questions. I think all the suggestions are what we need to hear, and basically how we have to start thinking about getting forward and thinking at the idea of making contact and seeing everything that's been suggested. No, go for it.
Thank you, Patricia. So Robin, would you come to the mic?
One more thing, Diane, that I just jumped into my brain here, and that is I wondered if John and Carolyn were aware of now I'm blocking on his name, the person who lived in the Gatehouse for his whole youth.
Embleton and Betty Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So John, are you aware of that?
No, but you know, in relative terms of what we have to contribute, you folks and others who love the house are clearly on the research part, and it doesn't seem to be profitable for us to do the research. We'll work on the process and making it happen, and understand that there's lots of people who are deeply into the research in a way that we never could be, because we're, by nature of our jobs, we're the generalists, right? Because we have a portfolio of things that we do, and that really prevents us from diving in deep on any one particular thing. And it appears that the research is well under control. So nice to know, but I don't see it as driving our part of the project forward.
Robin,
very good.
Robin, you're next on the agenda. Robin is going to do thank yous and has, I think, an interesting announcement. Robin.
I don't know about the announcement. But I want to thank you very much for the speaking for us tonight. On behalf of the Friends of Auchmar, we thank you for being at our AGM. And I wish to tell you that a donation will be given with your name to the Dovecote Relief Fund, I guess it would be called. And for Carol, we will send you a gift certificate. So thank you again for speaking to us tonight and giving us all that interesting update. You know, it was amazing. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for inviting us.
And at the board meeting last week, it was brought to our attention that we have to be careful when we have people who work at the city, that we don't give a gift that perhaps is inappropriate. So the fact that the donation is going to a city-owned building, hopefully your fellow councillors will see that as a good idea. So now I'd like to call our councillor, John Paul Danko, to say a few words. And John Paul, thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's too bad we're not at the Hamilton Club or somewhere face to face. But remember, I think the last time we got together was at the Warriors show at the Westdale, which seems like a whole other world ago.
It was.
It was less than a year though. Yeah. And anyway, I don't have a lot to add. I think it was a really positive discussion tonight. I know I think that we've got some work to do from the city perspective, and I'm really encouraged by what I heard from John and Carolyn and from the group. So overall, I think things like this take time, and I know it's slow. And with COVID overall, it's just everything is kind of been on hold and up in the air. So it takes some time just to refocus on all of those balls that were up in the air, before March. But we'll do that. And I think we seem to have a fairly clear path forward. So, I'm personally really encouraged about that. And I know the rest of council is as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor. John, could you ask?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. It's my privilege to kind of end off the meeting more or less by thanking Councillor Danko for his participation, his views. And I'm sure when he walked into the Ward 8 chair when he was first elected, he kind of ran into Terry Whitehead and he said, "Watch out for the guys that are dealing with Auchmar."
What's that?
More or less, and he probably gave you a concise or very good update on that. But we do appreciate you going to bat for us and going to bat for Auchmar. And we welcome your participation or any questions that you have down the road as well. And that goes for yourself, John, or Carolyn, or anybody else who's listening in at the present time. Again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John. And on behalf of everyone, city staff, members, non-members, we want to thank you, Richard, because Richard said, this is going to be a great learning experience. He said, I want to do it. And Richard, could you just say that you enjoyed doing it and it was easy or difficult?
Scale of 1 to 10, it was very easy because you and I tested it with the group a couple of times. So it gets a little bit easier. It is a little bit nerve-wracking, but went very well. And we had a great group, very patient.
We don't know how many people buzzed in and didn't get in, but
so that might be so.
About 20, 30 more people, but maybe they will send complaints. But no, we're learning. So on that note, I thank you very much, all of you. Thank you particularly to the board. And Deborah, who isn't on the board, has been just fabulous, making sure that everybody got notifications. So Deborah, thanks to you. If I may have now a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Pat, seconded by Robin. Thank you very much. Keep safe, and we'll wait. As John said, we don't know when the next AGM will meet, but John and Carolyn, we meet maybe not every month during this time, but we look forward to what you talked about, which was project management. So we've got a lot of terminology. I'm delighted that it's being taped so we can listen again. So sincere thanks for all of us. Keep healthy, keep safe, and contact us anytime. We're delighted to hear from you.
We'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Richard, thank